History has a funny way of revealing itself by accident. When a group of Chinese farmers inadvertently dug up one of history's greatest treasures, they were over the moon at the thought of their discovery, unlocking some lost piece of the past. Yet as scientists began taking stock of the farmers' find, they soon understood that some treasures become lost for a reason. Farmers uncover a 2,000-year-old tomb that was not to be opened. It began on a cool March day in the mountains northeast of Xi'an in Shaanxi province in 1974. Seeking to tap into the area's plentiful water reserves, a group of farmers had begun digging a small well about a mile east of the imposing Mount Li. As they got deeper, the farmers couldn't help but cast a hopeful eye at the dirt as they pulled each shovelful from the earth. For centuries, these mountains had revealed countless bits of promise for hopeful treasure hunters. Fragments of terracotta, as well as roofing tiles and chunks of masonry, were common discoveries, yet these small finds had never given way to anything larger. Was there more to be found, or was this just some thousand-year-old garbage dump? The answer seemed to indicate the former, as just a few hours into digging one farmer unearthed something remarkable: a man. Yet this one wasn't made of flesh and blood. He was entirely terracotta. No sooner did the farmer make his discovery that archaeologists were on the scene, clearing the surrounding earth to free the terracotta figure from the dirt. But there was something else beneath the next shovelful. Yet another terracotta soldier. Sensing this deposit of stone men was more than just a few misplaced garden statues, the archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar to see what else was lying below the surface, and what they found was nothing short of historic. More than 8,000 figures appeared on the scans, all placed in tight formations around what appeared to be an underground tomb. But there was no sense in guessing what else was down there. It was time for the archaeologists to see for themselves. A massive excavation began, with hundreds of workers brought in to help unearth this army of stone soldiers. One by one, terracotta men poked their heads from the earth and breathed fresh air for the first time in centuries. Along with the soldiers, hundreds of animal statues were also recovered, including those of birds and military horses. There were also more than 500 working horses pulling close to 150 full-size chariots. Laypeople were also well represented, as statues of entertainers like acrobats, strongmen, and musicians were unearthed as well. This discovery was unlike anything the archaeologists had seen before, yet one question remained. What was this Terracotta Army doing here? Scholars look to historian Sima Qian's Shaiji, also known as the Records of the Grand Historian, for the answer. Written in 94 BCE, the ancient historical text included tales of the ambitious Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Shortly after ascending the throne at age 13, Qin Shi Huang began work on an enormous mausoleum to serve as both his final resting place, as well as a testament to his greatness. However, not everyone was a fan of the new ruler. While Qin Shi Huang is credited for uniting the warring states of China, he did so through conquest and plenty of bloodshed. Yet even after his enemies were no more, the emperor feared they'd return to seek revenge in the next life. And so, as his grand mausoleum began to take shape, he commissioned local craftsmen to build terracotta soldiers to protect his tomb. Qin Shi Huang was laid to rest in 210 BCE. And his army of over 8,000 has stood guard ever since. Yet it appeared that these soldiers weren't much for fighting, as archaeologists were now snaking their way through the ranks in search of Qin Shi Huang's treasures, that is, until they hit a snag. As the archaeologists approached Qin Shi Huang's tomb, they began picking up high levels of radiation. Had the emperor's builders left behind more than just soldiers to protect his resting place? The answer, it seemed, was far more unbelievable. During his lifetime, Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with discovering the key to eternal life and went to incredible lengths to find it. In addition to dispatching armies in search of some kind of everlasting elixir, the emperor also became fond of one unusual liquid. And that liquid was mercury. Believing the radioactive element would preserve his youth, Qin Shi Huang surrounded himself with mercury and actually ingested it regularly. When his great mausoleum was complete, he even had rivers of the metal flowing through it. While this prevalence of mercury definitely contributed to the emperor's early demise at 49, It had also made Qin Shi Huang's resting place highly radioactive. To this day, the tomb remains sealed from even the most experienced archaeologists. Nearly 50 years later, Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum is now open to the public and attracts thousands of tourists each year. But while the legend of the Terracotta Army is one known far and wide, there was another Chinese grave found in that decade that was overlooked until now. But modern experts think it could mark a truly historic milestone. 3,000 years ago, in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in northwest China, a middle-aged man was buried in a spiffy outfit. He was laid to rest wearing red leather boots shu la la. Along with the boots, he also had on another interesting garment. To match his leather shoes, the corpse was buried while wearing fancy pants. These trousers were decorated with several different patterns. Stripes up top, darker pointed shapes on the legs, square-like spirals on the knees, and 2 sets of angular lines on the bottom. The trousers delighted the research team. Even though there was an issue, no one knew how old they actually were. With their enlarged crotch section, scientists thought they were used for horseback riding, but without a date range, it was difficult to learn anything about them. What the group needed was something they could test. Luckily, upon further exhumation of the grave, they made another curious find. Buried with the dead man was a fist-sized leather ball. This would be the key to a long unsolved mystery. The grave itself is a part of a larger graveyard in the Turpin Basin. Of the 3,000 plots, only 500 of them have been examined, and 3 of these, including the fancy pants man, contained the leather balls. Collectively, the graveyard is known as the Yangai Tombs. This graveyard was in use for 1,400 years, and by carefully digging up the dead bodies, archaeologists are reaching a better understanding of what held the most importance to this ancient Chinese civilization. The site itself is known for its remarkably preserved tombs. The whole Turpan Basin is like a treasure trove because of the climate conditions. Patrick Wertmann, an archaeologist for the University of Zurich. Unfortunately for some ancient peoples, much of their history is lost because of where they started. It's extremely hot and extremely dry. For us as archaeologists, it's really good because all these organic materials are naturally preserved, including textiles, leather, wood, and also the human, animal, and plant remains that are not usually preserved in archaeological contexts, Patrick said. This meant that subsequent dig teams were eventually able to uncover a trove of information about the civilizations in Yangai. They learned that they were skilled horseback riders known for their advanced society. The people of Yangai were one of the earliest known domesticators of wild horses, which brings us back to the mysterious pants and the leather balls. In other areas of China, scientists knew that people played different horseback-based sports, meaning that the balls were likely for a game. The balls were covered in rawhide and stuffed with wool and hair, making them very sturdy. One of them even had evidence of strike marks and looked like it burst during a game. 2 were painted with red X, which may have made them easier to spot. The rules of this ancient form of polo have been lost. Riders may have hit them with some kind of curved stick, as is depicted in other dig sites. There were similarly shaped sticks discovered in Yangai, but these weren't from the same time period. While we cannot say for sure what kind of game, or even activity, was performed using these balls, the fact that all 3 are nearly the same size suggests a similar use for all 3. Jeffrey Blomster, an archaeologist at George Washington University, said. Though their use still isn't entirely clear, researchers found something impressive about the balls' their age. We can now confirm that these 3 leather balls from Yangai are the oldest leather balls in Eurasia, Patrick said. They're 500,000 years older than other ones. Because researchers were able to date the leather balls, they could comfortably conclude that the fancy-pantsed horseman was also from the same time period. This kind of context is key. Maybe the horseman was known for his skill at this mysterious sport. I appreciate how cautious the authors are in their interpretations of these balls, essentially saying we cannot determine based on current evidence that these balls can be linked with polo, Jeffrey said. He's studied ball games in Mesoamerica. There are still thousands of graves left to examine at Yangai. Some of the remaining ones could hold more information about the society or the game they seemed to have enjoyed. Only time and more digging will reveal the answers. Over the last 6,500 years of human civilization, natural disasters, wars, and flat-out poor planning have toppled countless cities and villages. Ancient workers, with little nostalgia for human history, simply built on top of existing structures, unintentionally creating amazing sights for their modern counterparts to discover. Which was what happened in 1974, when Chinese construction workers digging a well came across more than sun-packed dirt and knotted plant roots. Something was waiting for them way down deep in the soil. Something enormous. In March 29 of that year, the construction workers broke ground about 1 mile from Mount Lee, an area rich with springs and waterways. The land was perfect for a well and something else. A mausoleum for China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The slab of fertile ground made sense to be the area picked for his final resting place. Of course, construction crews expected anything valuable to be safely within the known confines of the historical landmark. Still, evidence suggested there might be something bigger hiding in the area. Construction crews in the past had uncovered chunks of roofing tiles and bricks in the area, plus, every historian knew Qin was an eccentric character. When he was involved, anything was possible. For instance, Qin ascended to the throne at only 13 years old, after his father died. That's a lot of responsibility for someone just starting puberty, but that's how they did back in the day. This pressure has a profound effect on people. Though Qin was young, across 30 years, he transformed China into one unified nation. This is the origin of his kingly name Qin Shi Huang, or the first emperor of Qin. Fighting for unity wasn't the only thing on the emperor's mind though. Qin was obsessed with preparing for the afterlife. Before his coronation, he ordered the construction of his massive mausoleum, but the perhaps overly prepared emperor knew the structure wouldn't be enough for his journey to the beyond. This additional preparation for the afterlife was what the construction workers found so long ago. Buried in the soil was a solid statue. And another. And another. Archaeologists were called in. No one could believe the extent of the find. There were 8,000 terracotta fighters. Soldiers, archers, horses, generals, and others were sculpted in magnificent detail. Each figure was so incredibly realistic, researchers believed they were based on actual soldiers in the emperor's army. Smaller details really blew experts away. Every single person has their own hairstyle, build, expression, and pose. They were painted with unique colorations, further emphasizing their individuality. Experts estimate each took 10 years to carve, and the more they studied, the more they were blown away. The warriors face east, toward lands the emperor and his army had already conquered. No one knows why this placement was chosen, but some believe it symbolized that the nation's real threat came from Qin's newly acquired subjects, and not from those who were still free. These warriors were contained in 3 separate pits. The first one was 150,000 square feet, and the excavated parts were filled with warriors armed with bows. Behind the bowmen were 11 rows of soldiers wearing armor. These men held smaller weapons like halberds. Some of the fighters stood in wooden chariots that were pulled by 4 clay horses and flanked on either side by more warriors. This was just in the first pit. In real life, this part of the army would be the first thing that enemy combatants would come in contact with. It was meant to overwhelm the opponents. The archers could hit them from a long distance, and then the armored masses would get a chance. Pit 2 was different. The second pit was about half the size of the first. It contained mostly archers, but these fighters were carrying crossbows, not bow and arrows. In the back, lines of warriors on horseback silently stood, preparing to fight any threats to the mausoleum. During an actual battle, this part of the army functioned similarly to the soldiers and charioteers from the first pit. The crossbowmen in the front line would take turns firing and reloading, while the warriors astride horses rushed into the enemy. And last, but also least, in size, was pit number 3. The warriors in this section were the honor guard, a command chariot controlled by 4 soldiers surrounded by armored men carrying massive sticks. These guys, experts knew, were special. Archaeologists believe these soldiers were the commanders of the squadron. The chariot itself was covered in ornate decorations, indicating it had a special position within the army. There were other smaller pits surrounding the 3 major ones, too. These were filled with an assortment of civilian figures, like acrobats and assistants carrying bamboo tablets, so they could take notes. But how was this elaborate display even possible? How these warriors were created is still a mystery. Some researchers think one sculptor would create an entire figure by themselves. Others believe they took a Mr. Potato Head approach. This group believed each statue's unique look came from using pre-made ears, noses, and other facial features to help save time. Still others believed the emperor conscripted prisoners to create the entire army. The warriors are only a small part of the massive mausoleum site. Through radar, core sampling, and remote sensing, researchers found that the entire complex is 38 square miles. And only a small portion of this has been excavated. The terracotta figures may be guarding a perfect copy of Zion, complete with its natural streams that wound around buildings. Sima Qian, a writer from the time, described the tomb as being filled with a variety of precious things. Curious why this hasn't been fully excavated? Well, according to Sima, the site was also heavily booby-trapped, making scientists nervous to see what may lie beneath. In China, people have been putting underground space to use even in recent decades. During the height of the Cold War, the world's preeminent communist powers, the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union, were also at odds over differing political ideologies. With a willingness on both sides to escalate their conflict to war, the threat of nuclear catastrophe loomed larger than ever. Tensions between the two nations soon reached a breaking point, and in 1969, the Chinese government was forced to take drastic measures in order to protect the country. At the behest of Chairman Mao Zedong, the people of China began work on a massive underground tunnel system. Over 300,000 men, women, and children were put to work on the project, constructing 10,000 bomb shelters, connected by nearly 20 miles of tunnel. Ancient structures and cultural landmarks were toppled for the sake of Mao's vision, with nearly all of China's resources being poured into the endeavor. By the end of the decade, 75 of China's largest cities had been outfitted with enormous underground bunkers. With the shelters capable of housing roughly 60% of each city's population, the survival of the Chinese people amidst the imminent nuclear war was all but guaranteed. But the bombs never fell, and Mao Zedong's death in 1976 quelled the fears of annihilation at the hands of the Russians. With new leader Deng Xiaoping ushering in a golden age of socialism in China, it appeared that Mao's massive undertaking had all been for naught. Being the economic mind that he was, however, Deng refused to let such a significant and costly project simply crumble into obscurity beneath the streets of China. Through the Office of Civil Defense, the country began an initiative to commercialize the abandoned bunkers. Over the next 2 decades, laborers transformed Mao's defunct tunnel system into a network of underground cities, the largest of which formed beneath the sprawling Chinese capital of Beijing. Complete with supermarkets, schools, clinics, and even karate dojos, this project represented another leap forward for China's expanding economy. But even after these spaces were repurposed, the Chinese government continued to push forward with their subterranean efforts by mandating that all new buildings have underground defense shelters that could double as a source of income. And so, in addition to stores and clinics, these bunkers became homes. Today, over 1 million people live below the streets of Beijing, clustered in small communities that range from a few dozen to over 100 individuals strong. Residents of this underground city are known as the Shuzu, or, more commonly, the Rat Tribe. This peculiar society is mostly made up of young migrants from the countryside who arrived in search of affordable housing in Beijing. And with an average rent of 400 yuan a month, roughly $58 for one of these rooms, they're sure getting what they're paying for. Each windowless room is typically between 40 to 100 square feet, just big enough to fit a small bed and a dresser or two. Some aren't so lucky, as there are those that can only afford to stay in rooms that are shared by up to a dozen other people. As far as amenities go, a single communal bathroom serves as a dumping point for personal bedpans, and at 50 cents a pop, one can help themselves to a lukewarm 5-minute shower. But despite the poor living conditions, some residents see their situation as motivation. "Many of my colleagues live above ground, but I think it's too comfortable," said Wei Kun, an insurance salesman who shares his 300 square foot apartment with 9 other men. This place forces me to work harder. But even so, a tremendous amount of stigma still surrounds those that call themselves members of the rat tribe. Some individuals won't even tell their families where they're living out of fear of judgment. When my father came to visit me, he cried when he saw where I lived, aspiring actor Zhang Zai recalled. He said, "Son, this won't do." Unfortunately, the Chinese government's stance on the issue has only grown increasingly mixed as the years have gone on. Though city officials have expressed concern over the safety risks involved with underground living, most have chosen to turn a blind eye to the practice. With overcrowding becoming a growing problem in Beijing, there's really no other place for these individuals to go. "We never allowed residential use of air raid shelters," said Zhu Jinbao, office director of the Beijing Municipal Civil Defense Office. But as time went by, Beijing became so populous that people started to cram in underground. Despite the hardship and controversy surrounding the rat tribe, it appears that they're making the most of the situation while keeping their eyes set on what lies ahead. For these individuals, life underground is not a product of hard times, but rather a calculated sacrifice for the future. "I found a lot of people still hope one day to buy a house, or at least to live above ground," sociologist Li Junfu observed while studying underground housing at the Beijing University of Technology. "They have a positive spirit. As unconventional as living underground is, it is not the only unusual home to have. The place people choose to settle down is very personal, and because everyone is different, so too are the homes. And some folks are definitely more eclectic than others." 1. Live in the clouds with this airplane house. This house, located in Abuja, Nigeria, was built by Said Jamal as a gift for his wife, Liza, to commemorate their love of travel. 2. The Heliodome is a bioclimatic solar house located in Strasbourg, France. It takes advantage of the Earth's journey around the sun by utilizing the seasons. In the summer, the house provides shade that keeps the house cool, while in the winter, the sun peers in the windows to provide natural warmth. 3. Through the use of bamboo, plastic bags and bed sheets, Liu Lingchao, 38, constructed this 5-wide, 6.5-high mobile domicile. The 132-pound structure was designed by Lingchao in order to be transported with him as he walked nearly 462 miles back to his hometown. 4. Good thing that ring buoy is there. This house can be found on a lone rock on the Drina River, close to the Serbian town of Bajina Basta. It was built in 1968 as a tiny shelter. 5. The Ewok Village. This treehouse is available for rent through the Natura Cabana in southwestern France. 6. The Pot People. These cylindrical homes are located in Saquilamos, Spain, and are made from old wine vats. The residents are mostly ethnic Turks who have come to the central Spanish area to pick grapes. 7. Rooftop Rocks. This rooftop villa, found in Beijing, was constructed with fake rocks on top of an apartment building, but the structure was illegal and was demolished in 15 days. 8. Transformer House. Back to China, this house was built on top of a factory in the Dongyuan province. Word has it that the government has also deemed it to be illegal. 9. Entranced Agoran Mountain. Benito Hernandez is the owner of this house in northern Mexico. The house has been the home of Hernandez's family for over 30 years. 10. Crocodile Rock. Thierry Atta built this home in Ivory Coast's capital. Atta was the apprentice of an artist, Moussa Kalo, with whom he began designing the house before Kalo's death. 11. Let me just squeeze in here. This house was installed as an art piece in Warsaw, Poland by Israeli writer Edgar Chariot. The home, that is only 36 inches wide at its narrowest point, was designed as a memorial to Chariot's family, who died in the Holocaust. 12. That's a lot of books. Gary Chang is an architect in Hong Kong who redesigned this 330 square foot apartment into a custom home after 3 decades of living inside its boxy walls. 13. I don't want to know how you go to the bathroom in this thing. This upside-down house was built in the Siberian city of Krasnoyarsk as a local attraction. The home's rooms are also upside down. 14. Jernanimo. The Rock is the home of 15 fundamentalist Mormons. It was founded 35 years ago in a formation near Canyonlands National Park. 15. That's a cold shower. This house was built entirely of ice as a promotion for a German bank. Every part of the house is either ice or encased in ice. 16. Dome isles? These domes were built by US-based Domes for the World for villagers who lost their homes in an earthquake in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.